Well, hello, everyone. So happy to be here with you today. We have a very special episode for any of you who consider yourselves astrology students or hobbyists. But those of you who have a dream of perhaps one day becoming a professional astrologer, maybe you want to turn your love of astrology into a viable career. And so we have today with us an expert on this topic, Donna Young, who is the president of Kepler College. And Donna's going to walk us through 10 tips for those of you who are interested in turning your hobby into an actual career, a profession, the thing that you wake up and do and share every single day. So, Donna, welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. We're so grateful to have you here.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Donna. Well, so one of the first things I would love to start with, because this is your Astrology Hub podcast debut, I would love to know how you came into the field of astrology and a little bit more about the path that you took.
Sure. I'm glad you asked that question because I love telling this story, actually. Unlike so many people in the astrology world, I didn't have a lifelong passion for astrology. In fact, I barely knew anything about it other than the fact that I was a Pisces sun. And it wasn't until I was 40 years old, my Uranus opposition, the exact moment of my Uranus opposition, actually, that I got an interest in it. And it happened because my appendix ruptured. I ended up in the hospital. And I don't know, I came out of this in me. I make a joke about it that, some people, when they have like a near-death experience, they they go towards the light. It's like I didn't quite get close enough to the light. But when I came out of that surgery, I knew I had to study astrology. I absolutely had to study astrology. And I didn't know anyone who knew astrology or any astrologers. Like I had zero experience in it. So
Wow.
about 5 weeks later, after I was recovering, I had entered myself into a class to study, and it was from the ground up. Actually, I should back up a bit. I started by buying Astrology for Dummies. And I read through that book, and there was a piece there that I just couldn't wrap my head around. It's like, oh, I'm too dumb for the dummies book. So I have to go start taking some classes. And it's a really good book, by the way, for people who are just starting out, but I just couldn't wrap my head around some of the calculations. So I took some classes. The astrology teacher that I had 3 levels, 3 6-week levels. I took all three of them twice. And it was just an obsession. Like I knew that I needed to learn more. And, I was buying books, but I didn't feel satisfied that there was a lot more out there that I was missing somehow. And I had no real mentors at that time to ask. So I just did a bunch of internet searching and found Kepler College. And I was enrolled in Kepler College. That was back when they had a degree granting program. And I was enrolled as a student a couple of years later. And
Wow.
the rest is history, as they say.
Amazing. Okay. So I have a couple follow-up questions to that.
Yeah.
What were you doing before the appendix situation and the Uranus opposition?
Yeah. Paper where I live, I was an advertising sales rep.
And
So I worked in advertising sales and marketing, no relationship whatsoever.
amazing. Okay. And so in Uranus transits are usually associated with like that kind of lightning bolt, massive course correction sort of moment. I was telling you before we went live that I didn't actually have that experience. So I'm so curious to hear what you've seen when people really have that like big, huge awakening moment like you had, and then why some people don't have that.
Yeah, I think for me, it was because I wasn't on the right path. And so I think that people who are already doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, they're probably not going to have that. I mean, I have to say that everybody that was born the same time as me didn't have their appendix rupture and suddenly decide they had to start
Studying
studying.
astrology. Yeah, yeah.
Although interestingly, those lines, um, the natal line and the transit line were appendicitis and astrology degrees. So that was a funny coincidence too. I don't know why they're not all astrologers, but they maybe should be.
Wow. Well, and you say that you didn't go towards the light with your sort of
Yeah.
near-death experience, but you actually did, because
Well, I
astrology
think,
is the study of the light.
yeah, it is. Yeah. I've heard stories since then because I like to tell my story. I think it's a
Uh-huh.
fun one of people. There's lots of people apparently who, when they have near-death experiences, they come back with full knowledge of astrology. And I have this idea that I was just like, oh, so close. I came
That
back knowing that I had to study astrology, but not with any knowledge of it.
that's
So
I've
yeah,
never heard that, Donna. Like, we need to
yeah,
look into that more. That's
right.
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've heard that from a few people when I tell the story. And I've met a couple of people like that. Um,
Amazing. Okay. All right. Let's
yeah.
go into the top 10 tips for anyone who is wanting to become a professional astrologer.
Yeah, for sure. I have these little tips in
All right.
this.
And then just as you're pulling those up, I would love to also invite anyone who's here live to ask your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many as we can. But we'd love to engage with you. So if you do have questions, please put those in the chat.
Yes, absolutely. We'll answer questions. I think, for me, I wish I'd known a whole bunch of things before I started out. And I wish that there had been somebody to guide me along that process. When I started
Donna,
going to,
I'm sorry, but before you go too much further, I'm just seeing a blank screen.
oh, okay, let me try again.
Let's try again.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. It's still blank. It's still black.
Okay.
Do you want to go to the next, like maybe try the next slide and see what happens when we do that?
Sure. This is odd. I don't think I've ever had this happen.
Well, you know
Try
what?
something
I
else.
had a never happened before technical glitch today too. And doesn't Mercury go direct like tomorrow?
Yeah.
So we're like in the station right now.
It's okay. You know what? I'll just talk about them.
Okay, great.
Points. We don't have to
Yes.
have a slideshow, right?
Okay.
No big
Yes.
deal. We'll just roll with it.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one that I'm going to say, of course, is that it's good to get a formal education. Of course, I'm the president of Kepler College. I'm going to say that. But even if I wasn't in that capacity, I think that education is the most important thing. Because, of course, you're not going to be a good astrologer if you haven't studied it to any level. And when I also teach the fundamentals, the foundations of natal astrology at Kepler College, and I'm really surprised at how many people come in that actually have been dabbling in astrology for a number of years, and sometimes, I mean, even as much as 20 years, who have
Yeah.
never had any kind of formal study, and they come to us because they want to fill in holes in their education, which I think is really admirable. But it surprises me how many people are in that category. Like they might have even been practicing professionally for a period of time, but they don't have everything that they need to know. Can you practice astrology without knowing everything there is to know about astrology? I mean, I think we all do. None of us know everything there is to know about astrology. So we're
Yes.
all in that category. But sure, there's lots of things you can do without a full knowledge base, but you're only going to be able to go so far. You're only going to be so good without a solid education. So I think there's a few things that are important in that category. One is that certification matters for starters. There are people that are going to be going to your website that are looking for somebody who it's clear that they know about astrology. And it really surprises me in my own practice how many people, when they book appointments with me, that's the reason why. They know that there's lots of phonies out there, and they book
Yeah.
with me because they know that I have a solid education and I'm certified, etc. So it's important for that matter, but also because you just want to gain that whole bunch of experience that you get. I think it's best if you learn from multiple instructors and multiple techniques. And
Donna,
even over, oh,
yeah, I mean, we've seen the same thing as well, that a lot of times people come in and they've only learned from one astrologer, let's say, for example, and they don't even realize, for example, that there are many different house systems to choose from, or there are many different ways to approach a chart, or there are many different interpretations even of the same thing. So just even the awareness that you get when you're learning from a lot of different perspectives enables you to not get fixated in that there's only one way and this is the right way. And then when you get exposed to other things, you're like, oh God, I'm totally thrown off. I don't even know what to do with myself. Like I'm questioning the entire thing because you didn't realize that that was one way of doing it. And yes, it could be valid, but it was just one way.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I've seen this happen at conferences lots where the presenter will put a chart up and the, people will be like, well, that's not right. That's not the right house system. It's like there's not necessarily a right or a wrong
Right.
to those things. And so to be exposed, yes, absolutely, to a lot of different perspectives, however you do that, is really important.
Yeah. Okay. And Lucretia and K10, I see your questions. We'll get to those in just a sec. Okay. So that's tip number one. You're advocating for a formal education. What do you think about like, some of the
and I
great.
would also add,
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think I had a little blip there. I would also add that you want an experienced astrologer to give you feedback in a live format so that you're not just learning, but you're also getting feedback on what it is that you've learned.
Yeah, that practice element is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Kepler College does that, and a lot. That's a harder one for bigger, like for us to do, because some of our classes have,
Oh,
hundreds of students. It'd be
impossible.
impossible
Yeah.
for the instructor to give personalized feedback. So that's why I'm grateful that schools like yours exist when people are
Yeah.
ready for that. They want to like really dive in and do the practice and get that one-on-one kind of attention. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All
Okay.
right.
So that's tip number one, formal education. What's
Yep.
tip number
That's
two?
number one. Tip number two. And I think this is really a really important one that I almost feel like I learned late in the game. But to be informed of ethical practices and laws in your area. I didn't get into any trouble personally because of laws in my area, but there were a lot of stuff that I was doing that I wouldn't do today. Not horribly, horribly, horribly unethical, but like, well, yes, I would say it's horribly unethical now, but I didn't know any better. I was reading the charts for people's spouses without them being there, all kinds of stuff I was doing wrong. So I think that you really need to be aware of ethical standards. And there's lots of organizations and schools that have lists of ethics, but I think that's a really important one. As a student, it's really easy to get excited and go places that you probably shouldn't go.
Donna, I'd love to hear a couple more examples of that. I mean, this is where you hear from people who have had astrology readings that really harmed them because
Yeah,
something was said, and probably said with the best intentions, but that really, you hear horror stories like, oh,
yeah.
because you have this placement, you will never find love, or
Oh,
you will always struggle with money, or it goes on and on. I've heard
yeah.
horrible things. So a couple other examples. I love that example you just gave about the spouse. But like, are there a few other things that you were doing or that you see people do that you're just like, oh God, I wish people knew that that's just crossing a line?
I'm going to say, I mean, the biggest one that I see is astrologers who maybe get their ego in the way. They see the chart, they get excited, they want to share everything they know. It's like, well, let's find out, first of all, what your client wants to hear about. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the big one,
Yeah.
because maybe the client isn't ready for you to be talking about this thing that you see in the chart. It's not your job to tell them everything that you see kind of without their permission, right? You're not there to shock them. And I think a lot of this, I think a lot of it is ego driven. Like, oh, look at how good I am. And I can
Right.
find all of these things in the chart. Well, just because you can see it doesn't mean you should say it. I think that's a really
Yeah.
important thing that
I was with,
yeah.
yeah, I was with someone newer in my life, and she was telling me her recent experience with an astrologer who saw all the different Scorpio placements in her chart and started to go into how in past lives she had been through many witch burnings and all these things. And she was kind of like, I don't, that's just not really helping me. And I don't really want to know about that. And, it was interesting to hear how that was received for her, because for
Yeah.
someone else, that might be really healing to hear, that might be really like, oh, wow, that explains a lot. But for her, it was just like, no, that actually doesn't help
Yeah.
me, you
So you
know?
need to tread carefully, right?
Yeah.
You need to be listening to your client. First of all, finding out what it is they want to hear, but even in this session, then listening and getting feedback from them before you go down these paths that they're not interested in going down, and in fact might
Yeah.
scare them. Yeah, and turn them.
Right. Okay. So we
Yeah.
have formal education, we have
Yes.
ethical, like be aware of ethical and maybe even legal
And
sort of.
laws. There are still some states where it's not legal to practice astrology. So you have to be aware of what the laws are in your area.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would be the third tip?
And the third tip is get practice. I mean, that sounds obvious, but I think that as you're going through your studies, it's really, really helpful if you can find, I always say, find a group of mentally stable people. You don't want to be practicing all of your skills and making mistakes on people that are a little bit fragile, but
Mm.
find a group of people that you can practice your techniques on as you learn them. And then, they can go through the entire process of booking a reading with you and doing everything. And then they can give you feedback on the process of engagement with you. But also over time, if you do this over a period of years, over time, they can tell you what things were in alignment with them and what things weren't. So you know whether
Mm.
you've made mistakes or not. I've seen astrologers actually, or heard of astrologers who think that they're doing a fabulous job because nobody ever comes back. So that meant that their clients were satisfied. It's like, yeah, that's not exactly what that means.
Not
So,
necessarily, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
necessarily. Um, so you can get your practice that way. And then also you can just start small, because I think that's the hard thing too. When you're just starting your practice, and you've got all this education, it's like, how do I begin? That's the number one question. How do you begin? So you start, or at least this is how I started and how I recommend a lot of people start, just by doing small mini readings. So you can do that. You can go to expos and trade shows, or even if you want to do that for yourself, just have this little 15-minute session where you're looking at whatever it is you want to look at, sun, moon, ascendant, and just practicing on a whole bunch of people, where you're not having to get too deep, but you're practicing your skills and getting feedback from them. Really helps you to develop some spontaneous interpretation skills. You're not prepping for this, you're just going live.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the highly skilled astrologers, for example, that people in our community are used to learning from at Astrology Hub did that early on in their career. They were, I remember even Christopher Renstrom's story. He was at these, nightclubs in New York City giving readings,
Yeah.
really those quick ones. Even I remember Donna Whitwell also had an experience, a period of time where she was doing those quick little readings. So I can definitely see that. And for that, would you say that sun, moon, and rising is kind of the best place to start with that, or the lunar nodes, or
Yeah,
depending on what techniques you're learning?
depending on what you're learning. Sure, you're practicing what you're learning in the moment. Sun and moon, I mean, ascendant is kind of hard because not everybody that you're meeting in the bar is going to
Yeah,
know what time they were born.
right.
But the sun and moon for sure. Or, you can go farther out and look at Jupiter Saturn placements. Like, I think there's all kinds of way you could approach it. If you're studying transits in that moment, where planets are, and whether if they're making personal connections, I think there's all kinds of ways that you can do it. But don't get intimidated by, oh, I have to do this hour-long reading and I haven't developed that skill set yet. Just start
Yeah,
small and expand from there.
that's a really great angle. Would you recommend, even in those short little mini readings, that you first start with asking the person what they want to know, or would you just go into it?
I would ask them at least if they have any understanding of astrology,
Okay. Yeah.
because they might have lots of experience of astrology, and so telling them about their sun and moon placements isn't going to be that big of a deal.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, I'd
Okay.
start there. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So practice techniques, that's number 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Number 4.
Number business and marketing plan. And this doesn't have to be like a really elaborate take to the bank kind of business plan. It doesn't have to be a 35-page document. But you really need to know, the things that we always know. I've shared with you, I have a marketing background. It's the 4 Ps, right? Product, place, promotion, and pricing. You need to know all of those things. What's your product? What services are you going to offer? A really common mistake that people make is trying to be everything to everybody. But you're really going to gain greater success if you find a niche, find out, think about what is your ideal client and focus on that. And I think that's true for any kind of business, but I think especially for astrologers, because there's so many roads we can go down.
Yeah, people get afraid to do that because they don't want to get pigeonholed. But it's really interesting because we have our Astrologer Connect like reading platform, right? And 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 almost every single astrologer could say something about like soul purpose, for example. Like pretty much every single one would say that they can do that kind of a reading. But what I find myself recommending the most is astrologers that have a specific angle of astrology, and that way I can match the person with the question or the type of astrology. If someone's like really kind of more of a nuts and bolts, like feet on the ground kind of person, they're not necessarily going to resonate with the real esoteric, past lives kind of vibe. They're going to want something much more clear cut. So it is good to be clear on who you are, who you like to serve, and the types of astrology conversations you like to have the most.
Yeah. And I think in this business plan too, I think that when people are first starting out, they think, okay, this is how much money I'm going to charge. I need to do how many readings a day. You really have to figure out that way up and say, how much money do I need to make a living? How much money do I need to live?
Yeah.
And what does that equal? And how is that all going to come from? Because let me tell you, if you think that you're going to make your money doing 8 readings a day every day, you're going to get pretty burned out pretty fast.
Yeah. What is the average that you see? I know there's some astrologers who can do that, but it's rare. Like what would you say is the norm?
I think most astrologers, the ones that are seeing 8 clients a day, probably aren't doing any prep work.
Right.
And most of us are going to want to do prep work.
Right.
So I think most of the astrologers that I talk to are not doing more than 3 clients a day. And depending on what other things they're doing in their world, right? So, I have a practice, but I'm also busy being the president of the college and teaching. So, divided through my week, I'm not spending all of that time doing readings. It depends on everything that you've got going on in your life. Do you have products, actual physical products that you sell? There's all kinds of ways that you can make money. Are you a speaker? Are you writing? There's all kinds of ways that you can make money, all in the world of professional astrology, but it doesn't have to be back to back to back to back readings, which can be really exhausting.
Yes. Okay. All right. So number 4, have your business and marketing plan. Have an idea of how you're going to actually create the financial reality that you need in order to make this your career.
Yeah. And do you have a proper place to do readings, a quiet place where there's privacy for your clients, right? Because you really don't want to be meeting people in coffee shops doing readings that's touching them and making them cry. There's all kinds of things you want to consider that way. And then of course, how are you going to promote yourself? Big one, as you know. How are you going to do that? Are you developing an email list? Are you going to be on social media? How is it that you're going to do that?
Definitely important.
Yep.
Definitely important to consider those things.
Yeah.
And Sarah, I see your question as well about recruiting astrology companies and jobs. So we'll get to that too. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead. What's number 5?
Number 5, have a website. I know astrologers that don't have websites. These are astrologers that have maybe been practicing, since the 70s, and they have a loyal clientele that just contacts them and they don't need a website. But for most of us, that's not the case. Even if you don't want to be people going to your website booking appointments with you, although, if you're going to have a consulting practice, you want to make it easy for people to book with you, for sure. But even if you want to be speaking, for example, maybe you're busy enough with readings and you don't need that, but you want to start going on the conference circuit and doing speaking. the minute that your application comes in, the first thing that people are going to do is Google you if they don't know who you are. So you better have a nice facing website. It's like your business card, right? People don't have business cards so much anymore.
Donna, can I ask a question about the speaking path?
Yeah.
Is that a viable financial path for an astrologer? Or is that more like, what is the benefit of that for an astrologer besides just experience and exposure?
Yeah, you're not going to get rich on the speaker's circuit, that's for sure. But if you're going to conferences, but if you were to book yourself, there's all kinds of NCGR chapters, there's all kinds of little groups and organizations around the world. If you could find your way into those groups, you can make a little bit of extra money doing that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So have a website.
What yes.
was number 6?
And well, I'm going to add back up a little bit, because on your website, you want to make sure that you have really solid things like a cancellation policy, your refund policy, a privacy statement. A good idea to have automated scheduling programs so that you don't have to do all of that work yourself back and forth with emails, and to ask for testimonials through that process. So all of those things.
Donna, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on refund policies? I've heard it all across the board. Some astrologers saying, of course, you should have like 100% refund, sort of like a guarantee. There's other ones that don't do that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'll tell you what my personal refund policy is. I have one that is more about if you cancel if you right. don't show up to your appointment, I'm keeping 50% of your money, like that type of right. thing.
Yeah.
Or if you cancel less than 24 hours in advance, things like that. So those are the kinds of things that I have as a refund policy. I don't actually state if you're unhappy, I'll give you 100% of your money back, but I certainly would. If somebody was really unhappy, I don't spell it out necessarily, but all of those other things that are to protect you, because in the early days, I would have that happen. I didn't have a pay in advance policy that I do now, and people would book appointments and not show, and I'd done all this work, and you just want to make sure that you're protecting yourself.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So what is number 6 then?
Number 6 is ask for referrals. This is probably the biggest way that we grow our business. We need to do all of these other things. We need to make sure that we're out there, that our name is getting out there, that we're visible in the community. But still, after all these years, word of mouth is still going to be the biggest way to grow your business if you have a consulting practice. Mm-hmm. So ask for referrals, set up a program if that helps you, that rewards the people who refer you. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
Donna, do you have a specific way that you asked? Like, is there a way that do you send a follow-up email? Do you ask live right after this? Like, how do you do that?
Email personally is the follow-up email is a nice way to do it. It's not like so salesy when you're in the middle of your consultation. You're still kind right. of holding the space for the client. Right. It's still about them, not about you, but right. as a follow-up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Yeah. Number 7.
Number 7 is to have professional astrology software. And I know that, in Kepler College, for example, you can go all the way through the foundations course, the fundamentals, and just using astro.com, you're fine. You can learn a lot of stuff using astro.com. Having professional software not only allows you to be doing things when you're offline, but it just makes you look more professional. Granted, when you're first starting out, that everyone can afford, but it should be something that you've got your eye on as a goal. Yeah.
Okay. So that's, and for those of you interested, we definitely have great agreements with several of the top software platforms where they've agreed to extend discounts to our community. So we'll put that in the description of this video. So if you're interested in getting astrology software, that you can get some nice little perks for being part of the Astrology Hub community.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Okay. And Inner Circle members get even more. So there's like the standard, and then Inner Circle members get even more. So we'll put all those details in the show notes.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's good to have a relationship with those ones because they can be pricey, but in my opinion, well worth it.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
great. What would you say is number 8 then?
Number 8, networking. I mean, this to me is a huge one. So I meet lots of people who are like, because I do OPA peer groups as well, like I'm involved in that organization. People trying to start their business and they live like me in the middle of nowhere, and trying to build a community is hard. So, I mean, I think that the number one thing you can do is just grab the bull by the horns yourself. You don't have to wait for somebody else to create something for you. If you want to start a meetup group or however you want to do it of like-minded people, then you just start that. You just start offering some talks at the local bookstore or wherever you do to build up a local network. But also outside of that, you need to attend other talks. You know, you have to sometimes, a lot of the times, be prepared to be the person in the audience. You don't have to always be the person on stage. Going to conferences is a great way to build a network of people. I mean, I think this is just also important. But even outside of the astrology world, you can join other networking circles in your community to people, to expose people to astrology that might never have considered it before.
Mm. I find that there's a lot of resistance to this usually, the networking, and it's not just you introverts out there. Even as more of an extrovert, it's kind of like, networking, like, but there's also a lot of online ways to do this too. Like there's definitely tons of astrology groups. We obviously have our whole community. There's different, there's different ways to do it that aren't necessarily sort of what we think of when we think of networking.
Yeah.
And what do you think is the biggest benefit of it? Just like being able to bounce things off people, or what's the biggest
I
benefit?
mean, I think that's huge. Yes. Finding your community. If you're working in isolation, it's really, really hard. And
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be going out into the public because there are so many ways that we can interact with people on social media and whatnot.
Yeah.
You just need to make sure that you're in a supportive community, right? You need to find those right people. And there are many ways to do that. But I have to say that for me, just about every opportunity that I've had has just come from networking. And sometimes that's live people that I've met, and sometimes that's just through social media, how you get to know people.
Yeah.
But if I was just sitting here by myself, flogging myself, putting myself forward to things, I don't know whether I would have had the same results.
That's so interesting. Okay, great. All right. And number 9.
This is, but call yourself an astrologer, not an astrologist.
Okay, I'm so confused about this, Donna, because I see people say astrologist, and I'm like, wait, I mean, is that right? Like, what is it? Why is it astrologer, not astrologist? And where does that come from? Because I see it a lot,
Well, you know
actually.
where you see it. It's like social media platforms like Facebook, for example. I think it might even say on mine that I'm an astrologist because they don't have astrologer as
Oh,
they don't have it as an option. But the word, do I know the history of that? I do not. But there might be somebody smarter than me that knows the answer to that in this crowd. I don't know the answer, but the word is astrologer. So yeah,
okay. Okay, so that's a dead giveaway that you're not, maybe haven't had as much background as you need to have to be doing consultations if you're calling
maybe,
yourself an
yeah.
astrologist.
Or
Okay.
at least how the other astrologers will view you. Maybe your clientele won't view you any differently, but the other astrologers will.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And number 10.
Number 10 is to find a mentoring group. And I think this is a big one to help guide you and support you start to finish. Astrology is an unlicensed field. And I hope that we end up taking, as astrologers, I hope that we end up taking charge of that before, government steps in and mandates that we license ourselves. But I think it's really important for us to find the people who can help us as we're going, not just learning, but all the way through, regardless of where you are in your journey, even after years of practice, to have people who you can bounce things off of and who can give you feedback on what you're doing, check out your website, even give you feedback. I think that that feedback side of it is super important.
Mm, so good. Okay. Question from Lucretia. How do you know when you know enough to be able to start giving readings?
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, I've got some difficult things in my own chart. And I had been studying for about 10 years and going to conferences, and I would introduce myself as a student of astrology. And it was
Mm,
my friends actually who were like, Donna, when are you just going to drop the student astrologer? I think that's a hard one. That's a really hard one to know when you are there. I mean, certainly if you're going through a program like we offer at Kepler College, there's like, oh, here's your diploma, and you've done all the things, it's obvious. But if you're not going through a structured pathway like that, then, and if you're just doing self-study, and I don't mean to say just because it's valid, self-study, you can be proficient. I think it's a little bit harder, but some of the orgs have exams that you could test yourself with to see where you sit with your knowledge. I think that might be a way. But you can really start practicing early on if you're not going beyond what you're capable of doing, and you're remembering all of the ethical considerations. You're not doing harm to your clients.
mm. Donna, maybe we could flip it.
Small ways we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, maybe we could flip it. How do you know when you're not ready?
That's a good question too. I mean, you're certainly not ready if you've just read a book or had one course. I really think that you shouldn't be going out and practicing as an astrologer until somebody else has observed you in practice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's great. K10 asks, what books would you recommend if one is not going to a formal astrology school?
To become a practicing natal astrologer, I mean, I think there's so many good books. First of all, you absolutely need to have an ephemeris, in my opinion, if you want to track the movements of the planets. That's like number one. um I think that the Sue Tompkins books, Planet in Aspects, or no, that's not what it's called. Yeah, I think it is. That's a really good one. I probably have it handy. Rob Hand's Planets and Transits book, although it needs an update, and I understand that's years. For years he's been saying it's coming soon, but that one's been really valuable for me. Of course, you want to have your good foundational books, absolutely, and there are so many of those, so many of those.
I mean, look at all the books behind Donna. There's,
Oh, and
there's
I've got like more bookshelves all over the house. They're scattered all
yeah,
over the house.
yeah.
For technique, I mean, there's so many things you can talk about. For technique, I really like On the Heavenly Spheres, book of traditional technique, which is another thing that I would recommend, is getting traditional technique mastered before you move on to psychological and other techniques. Know your foundations before you move on.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
traditional astrology before you're doing, for example, like evolutionary astrology or some of these other.
That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I had a conversation with Kathy Cadge, who's the dean of Stephen Forrest School, and she thinks it's the other way around. So, if she was here, but it's my opinion that you need to have the nuts and bolts before you start diving into the more psychological elements of things.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And then Sarah asks, can you recommend any recruiting astrology companies or jobs to explore that are hiring while studying to be a professional astrologer?
I don't know of any such place that does that. What I would recommend is just finding the places that that might be hiring. Occasionally we hire, probably occasionally you hire. There are, bigger schools and individuals who
Yeah.
sometimes are hiring, and
Mhm.
ghostwriters, and yeah.
Yeah.
But as for a central location where all of things that are listed, if somebody knows about that, please let me know. I've not heard of any.
I've never heard of that either, but there you could also look at, if you like writing, you could look at like publications that have horoscopes, for example, and see if they're hiring, or you could look at online online sources that might be putting out astrology content and reach out to them and say if they're hiring. I mean, there's so in Donna, just to back up one more time, there's like in terms of the opportunities within the realm of astrology. Obviously, there's consulting astrologer. We talked a little bit about speaking. You talked a little bit about writing. What else is available for somebody that loves astrology and wants to be surrounded in it all day, every day?
Well, the obvious one to me is financial astrology. That's kind of, you're working more in isolation. I guess you could be working with bigger clients too and helping them with their business. I'm not a financial astrologer, so I certainly couldn't give you advice on that. But I have met lots of people that's how they make their living, just practicing financial astrology for themselves. Like
like day trading and stuff like that. Yes, actually, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, but also you could be advising companies if you could find companies that were open to that. I think that's a big one. Teaching, obviously, teaching is another approach. The interesting thing I think about, other than the financial side, just about everything is going to require you to have some good communication skills, whether that's speaking or writing or, whatever it is that you're doing. Even if you're just sitting with a client, you need to have good communication skills. So maybe I should have added that to my list, but
I'm sure you'll think of lots of different things. I mean, obviously it's hard to get it into 10 things, but you did a great job. The other thing I wanted to mention is we have an affiliation with a company called Rise and Thrive. It is a coaching certification, but she's developed, and they go into businesses, but they have developed an astrological assessment that they use when they go into businesses and when they go into leadership. And so anybody that knows astrology is way, like, already a million steps down the path of being able to be a coach with this organization. So they're going to be starting a new cohort in June. And so if you're interested in that, just be on the lookout. We're going to do a couple podcast episodes with Catherine Plano, and she's going to be taking a whole new group of astrology students who want that real coaching. It's a certification, a coaching certification. So that's another
awesome.
Yeah. Donna, if people are like, okay, I want the formal education, I want the diploma, obviously Kepler College offers that. Tell us a little bit about how and where they would start.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the best place to start really is we have a free quiz, and I'm going to pop the link in the chat here for you guys to share. We have a free quiz that gives you an idea of where you place. So if you've already been studying for a while and you just want to challenge some of the entry exams, you can do that. Or even if you don't want to challenge, give you in your education. So that's completely free. I think that's a good place to start. We ask people to start with our foundations. That's 40 weeks of practice.
How many weeks?
40 weeks all told. So 10 weeks at a time, 10 weeks for the 3 levels of 10-week classes, and then a 10-week practicum. And that is our fundamentals certificate. The entire diploma asks you then to have an additional 30 weeks of movement skills. So transits, progressions, solar arcs, solar returns, all of those things. And you can take that as a standalone certificate if you just want to do that, if you think your foundations are solid. And then we ask for you to get the diploma that you have a history classes, consulting skills, astronomy, chart calculation. There's some things that you have to take in order to get that diploma. So those people that have earned that diploma have worked really hard to get there. But you don't have to take the full diploma. You can take individual classes. You can take individual certificates. We've got certificates in medical astrology, astrocartography, counseling and relationship. Yeah, we've got a number of certificates that you can choose from, depending on where you are in your.
Are most people working for full time while they do this? And this is kind of like they're doing it on their own time, or like how much time per week would someone need to, if they were real serious and like, I want to be a professional astrologer within, I don't know, is a year reasonable, or would it take several years?
Our program, if you're taking one class a term,
Yeah.
would take you about 3 to 4 years.
Right. Okay. So I want to, in 3 to 4 years is more of a little mid-range goal. I want to be a
Yeah.
professional astrologer. How much time do they need to commit per week?
Yeah. So we say 8 to 10 hours per week, including
Okay.
your class time, but of additional study. And Amanda, that lines up with what they say about if you want to be an expert in a, you probably have, you need to read 1 hour a day on the topic that you're interested in, and in 7 years you'll be an expert. And it lines up with
Yeah.
that, really.
Well, and I love it too, because if it's something that you wanted to commit to, like, could you just be like, okay, I'm going to dedicate my Saturdays to this, or I'm going to dedicate, one afternoon, one evening a week, and then one day of the weekend, and
Yeah.
that's going to be the time where I am
Yeah.
committing.
I
Yeah.
mean, that time varies widely, depends on how fast you read, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
If English is your first language, like for some people, it might be more or less, but that's what we say as an average. And I think absolutely, if that's what you did, if you dedicated an evening and a morning every week to study the study of astrology, yeah, you like the books say, you can be an expert in 7 years. But
And
you can start
yeah,
practicing before that. You don't have to.
right.
Yeah.
Right. You could be supplementing your income earlier than when you're actually done with the diploma.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what kind of investment are people looking at in terms of from start to finish? What would they need to plan for from that?
Well, our classes are $295 for a 5-week class and $590 for a 10-week class. So I have to say that I never did the math on this. So let me just figure that out. It's a total of 130 weeks of classes. And
And obviously you don't have to commit to all this up front, right? You could start down the
no,
path and
you buy
yeah,
one class at a time.
right,
You buy
right,
one class at a time.
right.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the
That's
spot.
okay. So that's like $7,670 if you're paying full price, but we always have early bird discounts.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So amazing. And I from my perspective, and I know I'm very biased, but I feel that the opportunities within the field of astrology are only growing.
Oh,
Would you agree with that?
100% agree. 100% agree. It's just exploding. The numbers of people that are enrolled in our courses right now, it's like we never used to have to cut off the number of people that could register for our classes. And now that's a question we have to ask all the time. What's the maximum you'll take? What's the maximum
Mm,
you'll take?
mm,
Which isn't
mm.
that big of a number at Kepler College because, of course, the feedback part that we were talking about earlier.
Right. I mean, that's
So,
really great. If you are one of the people out there that would love to have that kind of like knowing that you get for yourself, even of like, I have the foundations, I have the training, I have the education I need to feel confident calling myself an astrologer. That's one thing. But then also if you, which is totally valid. And I can see the value in that. Absolutely. The other thing is if you really want that personalized attention
mhm.
and you really want to know, am I doing it right? Am I, that's also super valid. And I know that it comes up
Yeah,
a lot. Even people that have gone through a lot of our courses that we offer, you get to a point where it's like, am I doing this right? How do I
yeah,
know I'm doing it right? Aside from asking my clients, which is also a way to do it. You can ask people, but,
yeah.
but yeah, I love that you do that. And I love that you offer that because there's not a whole lot of places to go for that.
No, there's not. And it shocks me how many people that I've encountered in my journey who have never had another astrologer witness them doing a reading. It's like you're just winging it. I mean, you're not winging it. Of course, we're all kind of winging it, but you have no idea really.
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, I think that sometimes people get into it and they get the response from the clients that they get the validation from the clients, which I know there's a lot of astrologers that have gotten to where they've gotten in different ways. So there's not only one path,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
And Donna,
absolutely.
I'm super grateful for you giving us some clarity on the things that you see in your professional experience, the things that you've witnessed, the things that help create formally educated astrologers in the world. Because like you said, I mean, at some point we may have to have things like that in place.
Yeah.
And right now we're not there yet, but that could happen at some
Yeah,
point.
for sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of amazing astrologers, especially in the older generation. There was no Kepler College. There were no places to go, and they learned by themselves, and they're amazing. And there's tons of truly amazing people out there that never had formal education, but I'm also 100% confident that they would pass all of our exams, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, some of them, I mean, to become a professional astrologer, you had to go sit at the feet of of a professional astrologer and learn. You had to really like immerse yourself oftentimes in studying with someone one-on-one. So in some ways they had even more
Yeah. Or before
training.
the internet,
Yeah.
they did everything by correspondence. I inherited some books from a lady who had studied that way, including like all of her worksheets and everything that she'd
Wow.
submitted. I didn't keep them because it was just a massive volume of worksheets, but amazing that that was the dedication that not just the student had, but the instructor, the feedback that they got. There are some good educations out there.
Yeah. Well, Donna, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we close up here?
Not off the top of my mind. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. It's been great to be here. And certainly if anybody has any questions for us at Kepler College or for me personally, you can reach out to us. I'll type my
Amazing. And just go to the website, and we'll drop those links in the show notes too,
great.
the free quiz and your website. Just so you all know, in full transparency, we do not have any sort of affiliate relationship with Kepler College. We're just doing this because we know that it's part of the path for many of you, and we just want to make it easy for you to
Yeah,
go and find exactly what you need and know what you need on the path. You can really waste a lot of time trying to figure it all out yourself. So
that's
may as
right.
well just, these 10 tips are amazing starting point. I'm going to go through them actually one more time. So you said, number one, get a formal education. Number two, be aware of the ethical and legal considerations for your state. And then also just as a consulting astrologer in
Yeah.
general.
Mm-hmm.
Three,
Yeah.
practice your technique. Four, have a business and marketing plan. So be aware of what you're going to need to be successful as an astrologer.
Mm-hmm.
Number five, have a website. These
Yeah.
days, that can be super simple and super easy, thankfully.
Exactly.
Number six, ask for referrals. So don't be afraid to ask when someone has a good experience.
Yeah.
Number seven, have professional astrology software. We'll put links for that in the show notes. Number eight, prioritize networking. Get yourself out there, talk to people. Number nine, call yourself an astrologer, not an astrologist. I'm so glad you cleared that up today, Donna. I would like see that. I'm like, am I saying it wrong? Are they saying it wrong? What's the right one? Okay. And number 10, find a mentoring group. So
Yeah.
have that support of a mentor throughout the whole entire process, which of course Kepler offers in a very beautiful way. So go check out Kepler College. Thank you so much, Donna, for being here and sharing the things that you've learned, sharing a little bit about your story, and passing those tips along to our community. Thanks all of you for being here. Thank you for your great questions, and best of luck on your journey. It's so exciting. I've always said the world needs more amazing astrologers to help all the people through all the different things that they're going through. So yes, go for
Now
it.
more than ever. Now more than
Yes.
ever. Yeah.
Now more than ever. All right. Donna, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yes. All right, everybody. Thanks for being a part of our community. Thank you as always for making astrology a part of your life.